Volume 7 C99. Thanks to the use of magic, the arrival in our winter came far sooner, and trumpets blasted the announcement through the air as the delegates of nations began to arrive. The streets of our winter were open and empty, but lined with throngs ready to watch a royal procession. Soldiers, knights of the nines previously annihilated, now lined up to honor the formal delegates, and the population, perhaps ignorant of just whom they were cheering, simply enjoyed the relief, and an impromptu holiday began in earnest. The cheers of the crowd of commoners drowned the trumpets, and the royals put out their hands and waved to the onlookers. "Why did you choose to ride with me?" Nia asked as she waved out the window, though she kept her eyes on the royalty across from her. "I feel safer with you," Draudilin replied matter-of-factly and kept her hands in her lap. "Well, I like that. Thank you, but why? We've never met, I don't know you, and I can't imagine what we have in common." Nia responded as the carriage wound its way down the long road. The noise of the clattering wheels was inaudible due to the cheering, but with a combination of acoustical design and a little magic, the carriage riders could always converse with ease. "I heard about you," Draudilin replied. "They say you accepted thousands of elven refugees." "I did. A little over 10,000, they said, but I suspect the real number is about double that if you include the half-elves and the ones that were born in my country." Queen Baraha kept up the waving, but now intrigued, she turned her vertical pupils squarely on the human queen. "Is it because we both have dragon blood in us?" she asked. That may be part of it. But it's more. The refugees, they say you took them in as citizens. You're the mother of a nation that never existed in this world. And that you used to be a worshipper of the Six. Draudilin found it harder and harder to look at the dragonid queen. She kept her eyes on the floor between them, but she addressed her reasons as best she could. "Yes, that's right. I was charged with the capital crime of not murder." Nia barked out a rough laugh when she said it, and it was enough to cause the draconic queen's heart to skip a beat. "So you were lowly, rose to power, rejected the gods, waged war against your nation, and built one of your own. And now you bear the blood of a frost dragon and accept everyone in peace if they come to your country in that spirit. Is that right?" Draudilin tried to put a fierce expression on her face, but in the narrow, vicious eyes of the Queen of Frost, it was difficult at best, and she felt her effort waver almost before it began. Despite her prior claim, "I suppose you could put it that way. You make it sound more heroic than it really was, though." "The truth is I betrayed one set of beliefs for another that I held at the same time. I couldn't choose both anymore, and now here I am. A lot of innocent people and a lot of guilty people are both dead, and now I've got a kingdom. So, why don't we come to the point? What do you really want, Draconic Queen?" Nia asked and held out her taloned hand upturned as if to accept an offered gift. Her tail danced at the tip and her wings twitched ever so slightly. "My line is not entirely human either. I assume that's at least in part why you're so generous with your time?" Draudilin chose the words with care, and the dragonid queen's tail lashed about sharper than before. But she didn't answer the question. "I'm sure by now you know that I've surrendered to His Majesty. My kingdom is his, and my heirs are bound to his service. When I have them. But right now, you are still independent. You haven't given him your fealty, only your friendship, but you're not stupid. You know that can't last. No matter how good your friendship is, it's the nature of empires to grow, and you will either surrender, or clash again," Draudilin emphasized and leaned forward toward the dragonid queen, who in turn, paused in her waving to rest her arms on her thighs and lean forward herself. "You're going to suggest something uncomfortable, aren't you? If you're going to propose marrying me. I doubt I'm your type. I was hideous enough when I was a human." She chuckled a bit at her self-effacing humor, but the draconic queen didn't let it last. "No, not me. After a marriage is arranged for me, I'm sure I will have a child very quickly. It was so for both my mother and hers. As you are the founding queen with an unknowable lifespan, I'm sure you will choose to marry soon as well. And when you have a child, and I have a child," Draudilin let the proposal hang in the air, and the fangs of the dragonid queen were bared as her lips parted. "You want this to bring me into the... I suppose it will be an empire when all is said and done, if we're not calling it that already. If you want the truth, I've already communicated privately about the possibility. It will take time to get the demi-humans on the wagon with the idea of worshipping a god. But I'll bring them around. I can give a pretty good speech when I want to. So, this is to secure future peace. And earn you a little favor with your new master. Nia leaned back against her chair and crossed one leg over the other. The Dragonid Queen evaluated the proposal, reciting what she saw as the benefits. I can see the advantage here. My country integrates with ease, I retain power that nobody can challenge, and I have some security against the slain theocracy, plus I don't have to worry about any pesky misunderstandings with my enormous neighbor. We just bide our time and build. You know, Queen Draudillan, Nia said and let a little smirk form. I think I'm going to like you. You think ahead. Me. I'm not so great at that. I try, but... Well, let's just say I'm fit to rule demi-humans. It helps to keep a few friends around who can keep me grounded. So, is that a yes? Draudillan asked. It is. Yes. Assuming we have children of the opposite sex. And that their introductions go well, Dragonid blood will unite with the blood of the Dragon Lords within a generation. Assuming of course. I find somebody worth marrying who isn't repulsed by my face. I've been told it's scary looking, Nia said and leaned closer. Are they right? Draudillan had to suppress her shudder when it loomed closer. It is. A very rare face. You should take pride in it. The Draconic Queen answered, and the Queen of Frost leaned back in her seat again. The diplomatic answer always means the worst answer is true. But maybe my children will be luckier than I in that department. Now with that out of the way, relax and enjoy the ride. It appears we've arrived for the scrub matches, all the nameless ones looking to make a name for themselves before the big names begin. An emperor's chair brings out every bumpkin with a sword, I guess. Nia chortled and gestured to the drawer beneath the seat. Go ahead, take out wine and glasses. We'll share a drink the rest of the way, and toast to our bargain and our future prosperity. Draudillan moved swiftly, her hands flying out to snatch out all that she needed, her eyes eagerly looming like saucers on the long mist wine. Volume 7 C100. How long do you think it will take for copies to make it all over the theocracy? Nu asked after the messenger left with the bundle of papers. They were alone in the inn, only a day or two from our winter after taking relays of horses to make up for lost time, and as with the other places of residence, this was the finest room available, complete with a workspace and even a small stock of wine bottles. Nu was seated at the table, her ears twitched uncomfortably, her fingers picked at the smooth varnished wood while Raymond dealt with the messenger and sent him on his way. I don't know. If they use magic to make copies and leave at the same time. A few months? Maybe less. But, he straightened with his arms at his sides and bowed deep at the waist so that he was looking straight down at the floor. Thank you for letting me use your story. That can't have been easy. Nua looked away when he bowed to her. The bed lay on the far center of the room, large and comfortable looking. Her own was in the room beside his. She averted her gaze to look at the wall between her room and his. It wasn't. But if you're willing to risk yourself, your reputation, maybe your life, so am I. It's hard to believe any human would do that for us. Even the good ones. They might help one of my people, but to dare to challenge the totality of theocracy doctrine? She finally looked at him, and she had to laugh. You must be insane. She stopped laughing when he winced at the noise and took a step back. His hurt look was almost childish, but she had no doubt it was genuine. We need that kind of madness. Maybe if we had more of it, things would go to shit less often. So, what now? When we get to our winter, do you look for Zeshi? I don't know. How do I make amends to her? How do I make this right? How do I make anything right? Raymond asked. Nua picked at the table some more. Bits of the thick varnish got stuck under her fingernail and she pulled her hand away to pick the crinkled stuff free. You say that like I know? This is nerve-wracking enough as it is. When my story makes the rounds over the theocracy, I'll be lambasted as either deserving everything I got for being a sinful elf who didn't know her place, or a slutty elf who wanted what I got, or a snake of an opportunist out to increase my own status by playing the poor pathetic victim. I'm going to be the most hated woman in the theocracy, and I have no doubt that I'll have more targets on me than an archery range. None of that is true about you though. You know that. I know that, Raymond said and approached her. He held out his hand to allow her to take it, but she didn't, and he slowly let it fall away to lie awkwardly at his side. Do you really think this will be effective? Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. Maybe you could have just used some arguments. Or she sighed and went back to picking at the table with her finger. A story convinces more people than any argument. It's true that a lot of people will say terrible things. And there is some risk, but there are enough examples around them, at least in the cities, that people will start talking. The underground plays will spread it, and maybe, just maybe, we can start to shake things up, Raymond said with a hopeful trace of a smile on his face. Just to be clear, you're not doing this just over Zeshi, are you? Nu asked. I'm not saying I think you are, but you can't blame me for asking. Raymond sat down at the table across from her, looked her in the eyes, and said, No. I won't lie to you, won't tell you this isn't part of my thinking. She's precious to me, and I overlooked her elven side, in part because she wanted me to, and in part because I wanted to. But this is about more than her, a great deal more. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll take your word for it, Noah said and stood up. She looked toward the closed door. I'm going to my room, this has been a long day and I'm tired, I want to sleep. She rose to her feet and the familiar chill came over her until he said gently, Good night, Noah. I'll see you in the morning. She walked to the door with her head held high, and though she could feel his eyes follow her, she never broke her pace and never hesitated. She opened the door, closed it behind her when she passed beyond the threshold, and left him behind. It won't be that long before it won't be safe for either of us to be alone at night. When all those letters reach various places. Still, she thought as she closed and locked the door behind her as she peeled off her clothing, I think he's overthinking how effective it will be. No matter how vividly I describe the pain, no matter how I talk about a wounded heart, or despair, or the things I saw, most humans will just dismiss it and say, it's only an elf. But then again, I've been wrong before? Nua thought and pulled down the sheets to climb into bed. She lay on her stomach and brought the pillow under her cheek. And with that, she fell into a deep and dreamless slumber. When morning came she made herself ready, binding her hair into a braid behind her back, and briefly, as had become her habit, took a lingering look at her ears in the mirror. Whole and intact, it was a miraculous thing. Her fingers traced over them just once, and she wiggled them up and down just to watch them move. Then she was gone, breezing to Raymond's room and knocking on the door. Here, he shouted through the barrier, and she turned the knob to find it open as it always was. You're going to have to get into the habit of locking that, Raymond. Nua told him in no uncertain terms. If you want to play with fire, I'm certainly not going to stop you, but part of my... She paused and pursed her lips, her eyes became like steel before they softened toward him. Purchase reason, was to act as a bodyguard for you. How was it he put it? Nua looked away and in her best imitation of Dominic's smooth voice she said, so you can read, write, mix potions, order a house, and take a hit. And, she shook it off, it doesn't matter what else he said. The point is you're going to start making things harder on me if you stay reckless. I suppose. Raymond grumbled. Now why didn't we go down for breakfast at least, he said and made to stand up. Absolutely not, Nua said and sharply shook her head. I took the liberty of ordering breakfast for you when I checked us in. We'll eat here where I can keep an eye on you, and then we'll leave. Raymond did a brief double take and intuitively sat back down. But, I like being out in public. And I like you being alive, Nua said and cleared her throat. She put her hands on her hips. I swear, I think half the reason the human lifespan is so low is because you all have death wishes. Raymond rolled his eyes. Half the reason I was so eager to go on this trip was to avoid all the old protocols. I thought it would be like being in the field on missions again, not like a damn prison, he said back to her with exasperation. Their sighs came at the same moment, and the laughter did as well. When it finally died, Nua went and pulled the chair out for him and pointed to it. Sit. You're enjoying this? Raymond accused her lightly. Many years ago I ran the household of one of my masters, and they relied on me for many things. I ordered their servants, ensured their books were kept, and even taught their son how to make potions so that he could one day become a great magic caster. Other than matters of politics and faith, I was closely listened to and could speak my mind. I was actually happy there, it felt like I was treated like a person. I suppose this is kind of like that, so yes. Yes, I am enjoying it, Nua said and pushed the chair in as Raymond did as she said. So, what happened? Raymond asked, and Nua's energetic face fell. It ended badly. That's how those stories always end, Nua said and left him to go to the door. She opened it to find a servant bearing a silver tray, his hand up and ready to knock. "Thank you," she said, took the tray, backed up, and closed the door before the young man could say anything. She returned to the table, set the tray down, and removed the silver covering to set it aside. On the tray was some simple mealed oats, a small pitcher of milk with a cup of tea with sugar cubes stacked in a porcelain bowl, a portion of eggs with 2 slices of bread with a pat of cream-colored butter. "And your food?" Raymond asked pointedly. Noah looked at him dumbly. "What?" he pressed. "I have eaten with you all at once. Why are you asking me now?" Noah asked of him with a hand on one hip while the other rubbed her forehead. "It just occurred to me that you could eat with me," he said with a casual sort of air, taking his eyes away from the meal while still reaching for the bread. "Raymond. I think you are a good man," Noah said and put her hands behind her back. She straightened and put her feet apart. Her pose, in Raymond's mind, would have made a scripture member proud. "I think you played a bad one, and just didn't know it. I think you don't look at me the way your people, your gods, say you're supposed to any longer. But this?" She moved one hand back and forth, pointing between him and herself. "No. You tried to mutilate me. I know it was you who stopped you, that you couldn't go forward with it. But it will be a long time before I can sit and eat with you as if we're friends. So please, if what I want really matters, don't press me to do anything I am not already doing." Raymond pursed his lips. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment and looked down at his meal. His appetite was gone. "I can forgive you, I do. But that doesn't mean I can forget, or be comfortable with anything other than what we have to do, not for quite some time, and maybe never. I just don't know if that's a problem." "It's not. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you," he answered her and said nothing more. Noah let the moment hang, unsure if he had more to add, then said, "Thank you. I mean that. I'll eat on the road, finish your breakfast and we can be off." She perked up. "I have to admit, I'm looking forward to seeing the arena in our winter." Raymond took one bite of his bread, chewed, and swallowed, then set it down. "I think I'm done. My appetite is gone," he said. "Eat," Noah said. But he started to object. "Raymond." "Eat," she said more emphatically. "If you really plan on taking on the world, do so on a full stomach at least," she said more softly. "I don't mean to sound cruel, if that hurt or ruined your appetite. It's just that there's a lot now, things for me to deal with. I appreciate the spirit of your offer, and you need food whether I accompany it or not. So eat. You really did run a household, I swear." He got some of his humor back and chortled a little before reluctantly finishing his food, though whatever flavor it had, he experienced none of it. "Drink the milk," Noah instructed. "I don't like milk." Raymond returned back at her with a mistrustful glare as she poured a cup and held it out. "It won't be long before I'm going to have to start taste testing everything to make sure you're not poisoned. I happen to like milk, and if you don't drink it, I won't get any," Noah pointed out. "I could just buy it for you, you know," Raymond suggested, still giving the milk a baleful look. "That sounds like a gift. Permit me to refuse. There was one once." He was fond of gifts, but they were never given with a good heart. "Given that I am not a free woman. Not until I can be sure I won't be hunted at least. I'd rather not. So drink your milk." Noah pointed at it again. Raymond picked it up and began to drink, then stopped. "Wait, poison?" he asked. "You don't really think anyone would?" You do think that," he said when he beheld her drawn, grave expression. "I do. Even if your friends wouldn't, it's a big country, merchants, the big latifundiers are not going to like anyone threatening their business. And you're a former black scripture. But you are also human, and you can die. You know as well as I do that there are no magic items that can protect against every poison, and I'll bet it's not hard to find out what ones you use. So, in a few weeks I'll start tasting your food." Noah crossed her arms in front of her chest and gave him a long, lingering look down her nose, almost daring him to argue. "But you could die," Raymond said as if it weren't obvious while he, with some reluctance, drank the foul white stuff he loathed. "You can replace me," she said, and that gave him pause. "You don't mean that," he said as he pushed the empty cup away. "Of course I do. Just buy another." or just hire an orphan. Inasmuch as what you did to get those 3 constitutes hiring, that is. It doesn't matter. So what? She asked while they walked to the door. So, I'd rather you not die? He said, his pitch going up a little as if it were a question. Me too, but you're a theocracy cardinal, one who might actually do some good for once. I'll work to keep you alive even if it kills me, if that's what it takes to end the nightmare of your country, Noah declared with a resolve that left no room for argument, and Raymond gave up. Volume 7 c. 101. Layali held her cheek and fell immediately silent. Her tears stopped flowing, though they still pooled in her eyes as she looked up at the old woman. The woman's hand was raised, ready to slap a second time. It jerked a little farther back, promising that it would hurt more if Layali made a sound. Good. You're smart enough to shut up. Pain is a great teacher. Suffice it to say, child, that you will learn a lot here, one way or the other. The old woman said, and with agonizing slowness the hand came down, left and right folded together in front of the woman's waist. While you are here, for as long as you are here, you will be expected to work, to learn, and, if you know what is good for you, to make yourself wanted. There is always a call for young labor, apprentices and such, for one trade or another. You were very lucky, the ones to drop you here paid for your care, so that means you'll get twice as much food as the rest, and new clothes instead of old ones. The old woman frowned when Layali said nothing. You can thank me now, the old woman added expectantly. Layali looked down at the floor. I was speaking to you, child, the old woman said and drew her hand back. What do I call you? Layali mumbled and looked behind her at the door. Lady Gruel, the old woman said, her fingers twitched, ready to strike. Thank you, Lady Gruel, Layali mumbled. The hand lowered. Better. It needs work, but it's a start. Spare the hand and spoil the child. Now follow. The old woman took her cane in hand and began to walk down the long hall. Her cane tapped the floor and created a cavernous echo out of the emptiness. Blew down the passageway that raised goosebumps on Layali's skin. Her ears twitched as she looked left to right. The doors were plentiful, but that was not what caused her ears to twitch. Silence. Occasionally broken up by someone saying, faster. Then more silence. And the doors. They've got locks on them. On the outside? She looked at the bolts and noticed where they were placed. She recalled the house of her master, her father. The locks on every room were easily accessible to him, but I was too small. The locks here were vertical, and went from the top of the door to the short horizontal top door frame, completely beyond her reach no matter what she did. On the outside of every door there sat a banded candle burning down and casting light over the floor and sending her shadows scattering in every direction as she passed beneath them. The tapping of the old woman's cane and her steady but slow footfalls became a cause for Layali to wince. The one thing they can't do is kill me, she told herself, but it was a cold, cold comfort that clasped her heart as the old woman stopped at a door. She drew a key from around her neck and rose on her tiptoes to unlock the bolt which held the door shut. She came down, stepped back from the door after jiggling the bolt open, and smacked her cane up to the wall beside the brass sconce holding the banded candle. The candle has 4 more hours to burn. You will work until then. The door will be locked until that time, after that you will be fed. While you work, the speaker will teach. Can you sew? Layali whispered, why yes, a little bit, Lady Gruel. Good. Lady Gruel's dour frown lessened a little, though it was no smile. Her cane lowered until the tip tapped the floor again and she reached for the door. She turned the knob and swung it open. Layali did not step forward. In front of her were long tables, row by row and end to end, and at each table sat a stool. On each stool sat a young girl around her size, all of them wearing old, worn-out brown clothes. Simple laced-up shirts and skirts that were little better than bolts of cloth with laces sewn into place where the 2 ends met. As to shoes, some had them, others did not. Those who did, wore shoes that were little better than leather nailed to untreated wooden bases. At the head of the class stood an equally old man who, for the door face Layali could see, not to mention his matching cane, might as well have been Lady Gruel's own brother. Every girl who sat on the bench was busy working, with needle and thread over cloth. When the door opened, their eyes met hers just as hers met theirs. It was a familiar look. When I was in the river. Away from Cerebrate, before I knew I couldn't die, but was already dead. A chill went down her spine. The girls who worked were not starving, but to call them well-fed would have been false. Their legs and arms were thin, a far cry from the health Layali now exhibited thanks to the copious amounts of food she'd gotten used to. The looks they gave her ran from hateful to pitying, and they did not last long. "I have another one for you, Jose. She can sew some," Lady Grill said and looked down at the top of Layali's head, "or so she says. Put her to work, her clothes will be waiting for her and the others can show her where to eat and sleep." The one called Jose took a look at her and motioned to the tables. "Back to work." Jose barked at the girls who briefly paused, and pointed to an empty stool. "Fine, Grill, fine. Do I need to mind the boys for you?" "No, that won't be necessary. Just don't fall behind, it would be a shame if we did, and had to." "Oh say, cut rations again because we simply couldn't afford enough," Grill said with an eye toward the tables. Layali's indignation rose like a fire in her belly. She'd seen the sum paid to take care of her, a fortune in a single hand, working in her father's house taught her things. And there was no doubt in her mind what was happening. The working girls sped up, but Layali whirled on Grill and stared up at her with hate-filled eyes. "You liar. Mama and Papa paid enough for you to feed me and everybody here good food for years. You're a bad one. Just a greedy, evil person." She searched her memory for any words that would do, anything that would convey her contempt and disgust the right way. Finally she found them. "Fuck you." She screamed it with such virulence that it was as if time stopped dead. Mouths fell open in shock from the youngest, smallest girl, to the old man and Grill herself. "You are ungrateful trash. I was being nice using only my hand because I thought you were smart. But I see you need the cane," Grill hissed. Layali, however, felt tears of rage burn in her eyes and hissed back with the same hatred, "If you lay one hand on me, when Mama Zashi and Papa Brain come back, you'll wish they only killed you. They killed a monster to protect me, then we cooked and ate it." She licked her lips, it was delicious. Grill took a step back from the girl, and for just a moment, she believed. The unbridled conviction in Layali's eyes was hard to doubt. But experience taught the old woman otherwise. "Stupid girl. Nobody ever comes back. You're here till somebody picks you to work for them. You're here because you were a burden. Because they didn't want you. Because they didn't need you. That's why everybody is here, and that's why you'll be here until we're done with you," Grill hissed, raised her cane, and pushed the tip against Layali's chest, sending the small girl staggering backward until she fell. "You're wrong," Layali shouted, not hearing Jose approach over the sound of her crying defiance. "You heard them. They left me to keep me safe. Because it was dangerous. They'll come back for me." The withered hand of the old man grabbed her by the back of her neck and squeezed, briefly cutting off her power of speech. She grunted as she was slammed down over one of the tables under the watching eyes of the other workers. "You will learn respect. Spare the hand, spoil the child," Jose shouted, and his own cane struck Layali on her backside. "You will not speak to adults that way. You speak when spoken to. We are your parents now and we will teach you. You'll learn. You all learn," he shouted and brought it down again and again with a resounding smack against her behind. Layali yowled once before she found her words. "They'll kill you. I'll tell them what you did and they'll kill you." Lady Grill only laughed. "Foolish girl, if we ever see them again, we'll eat our canes." Layali stopped screaming profanities and threats after a few more such strokes, but she glared at the old woman until, huffing and puffing, exhausted by his age and effort, Jose let her go. "Now sit," he said and pointed to a stool again, "and so. The others will show you, and do not let me hear those tears," he snapped. "Children need discipline, and that's not worth crying over." With nothing else she could do or think to say, she set her jaw and, though she winced when sitting at the table, she did, then picked up a needle and thread, and started to work. Volume 7 C 102. Layali kept her head down and her fingers moving. The silk fabric she was working with was nice enough at least. It was soft to the touch, but her bottom ached. She shifted on her stool while the old man droned on. "It is always important to listen to your elders. As adults we have seen more, know better than you do, and our guidance, firm though it may seem, is always for your well-being." Even having never been to a school, Layali recalled serving tea to her human half-siblings while they were being taught their lessons by their tutor. As education went, the difference was clear enough to the cynical half-elf. The smell of little droplets of blood from needle-pricked fingers was thick to her sensitive nose, but she did her best to ignore the scent and focus on her work. "Faster," Jose said, and cracked his cane over his desk with such force that the class all but jumped out of their skin. Layali, however, did not. "I have your measure now." She did speed up, but even though there was a burning, thudding pain on her behind and it hurt to sit, it was nothing compared to the tearing of monster flesh, the feel of a sword across her throat, or the battering of Cerebrate or the waters that carried her to the man she now called Papa. The hours passed her by. The old man's droning voice became as much background noise as the babbling river she'd spent so much time in, and beside. She ignored him while her deft little fingers worked needle through cloth, and a little game formed in her mind. "It's not a needle-piercing red cloth, it's my sword shedding blood, fighting back. And winning." She worked and worked. Every plunge of the needle through red fabric felt like another victory until the door opened. "Time to eat," Lady Grull said. Two older children with dirt-streaked faces where bruises were already starting to form, wheeled a cart into the room. They were young males, and walked with a limp, hobbling on sprained ankles, their eyes down, and their clothing obviously a size too large for them both, and torn in places. The cart they pushed held a potato, an apple, and a small hunk of cheese that had seen better days. Layali felt her belly rumble in spite of the pitiful fare, but beyond her focus on hunger, she focused on what she saw. In front of some children, the cart pushers simply slapped down a potato. In front of a few more, they slapped down a potato and an apple. Almost never did they add the cheese. The girl seated beside Layali leaned over. "The ones who get the cheese met quota," she whispered. "The ones who get the apple and potato, have people paying for 'em. And the ones who get only a potato? They got nobody." Layali watched as single potatoes were made the norm, and waited her turn. The cart finally made it to her table, and a potato was slapped down in front of her by a dirty hand. The boy reached for the apple, and Jose cleared his throat. The young boy looked at Layali with pity, his hands already shaking as he looked over his shoulder to the old instructor. "That one is a discipline problem. If she behaves, she can start getting her apple when the bruises are gone." He tilted his chin up in the air and looked down her nose at her. His beady eyes were focused like a hunter on his prey. "Test me," he seemed to say. Layali glared back in return. She realized then what he wanted. She stretched out her hand and took the brown oval lump, and holding it up to her mouth, she took a bite and began to chew. Only then did he turn away and bring his cane down on his desk again. "You have 5 minutes to eat, then you will sew for 2 more hours before you sleep again. Patience. They're coming. I just have to be patient. They won't leave me here," Layali told herself, and when she finished what passed for her meal, she returned in silence to her work. Brain's limbs weighed on him like lead, and from the look of it, so did Zeshi's. They moved with slow steps as if half dead when laying camp. They barely spoke, only little by little did the work get done, and it was well into the night when they lay their bedrolls down. "You forgot to cook," Zeshi said as she pulled the cloak over her body. "It's Layali's job to do the cooking," Brain replied while looking up at the stars. "Layali's not here," Zeshi replied without turning to look his way. "I know that," he answered her while watching the twinkling lights in the distance. "So why didn't you do it? You know I'm hopeless at that stuff still," Zeshi asked him and rolled onto her side to look at him. "Because it's Layali's job to do the cooking. And she's not here," Brain said. His voice was more hollow as a drum and soft as a whisper. His eyes blinked several times and he added when Zeshi said nothing more, "And would you have eaten if I had?" Zeshi poked at the ground with one finger and for a few seconds at least she was unable to say anything. No, probably not. I just don't have my appetite anyway." "It doesn't help that there's no fire to cook with," Brain pointed out. That Zeshi closed her mouth when Brain finally looked her way and said, "Layali's job. You're sure we did the best thing?" Zeshi asked and looked back down the road they traveled by. Given what's already happened, she'd be dead twice over if she didn't have that talent. If we kept her with us, how long will it be before we have to protect her from the theocracy? How long will it be before the Aganti take her hostage, or she gets injured by a monster? Brain said it in as pragmatic a fashion as he could, but he wasn't looking at her when he said it. He was looking down the same road. Is something bothering you? Brain asked. Other than the obvious, I mean. Just. Look. I'm a screw-up. I fucked everything up for you, her, and me, and more besides, from the moment we started traveling together. I'm sorry, Zess, she said. It wasn't her first such apology, but the way her lips were moving, he could see she had more. Her eyes went from him to the road and back again, and she went on, so I didn't want to say this, but I don't know. Don't know what? Brain raised one eyebrow and lowered the other while she exhaled a deep breath as if she couldn't hold it in anymore. When I was living in the theocracy, before I started hiding these, she ran a hand over her left ear, I would get looks from humans. Sometimes disgust, sometimes hatred. I didn't know what they were at the time, but now that I do, I recognize them. But the looks I got from the cardinals, even way back before the current crop were even born, was different. They looked at me like people looked at the elves we saw being auctioned off. Like I was just useful to them, do you know what I mean? Brain shook his head. No, not really, I've never been really useful to anybody before. Well, there's a look for it, and now that I think about it, that woman was really focused on the coins I gave her. She didn't ask anything about Layali, she didn't even talk to her while we were there. Zess, she pointed out to him, and Brain's brow began to deepen as a frown spread over his face. So, what are you suggesting? Brain asked. I don't know. Maybe nothing, but I think we should go back. We can take a closer look at the place. We don't have to let her see us, just look. If they're treated well, then we can rest easy. If not? Zess, she let the statement hang. Brain partially drew his sword, then sheathed it loud enough that the snapping noise was accompanied by a burst of air that moved his hair and hers alike. That's a good point. I don't know about you, but suddenly I'm not nearly as tired as I was. Should we head back now, or do you need a minute? Brain asked, but before he finished speaking, Zess, she was already up and rolling her bedroll. Are we going, or what? She asked, and for the first time in hours, Brain's eyes lit up as he moved to follow her lead.